Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon was developed by Next Level Games, a Canadian company previously known for helping Nintendo make the Super Mario Strikers series. Starting in 2014, Next Level Games began developing titles exclusively for Nintendo. This decision occurred shortly after the release of Luigi's Mansion 2. The game was initially revealed during Nintendo's 2011 E3 press conference, which actually showed gameplay. I always thought this was interesting because the game wouldn't release for nearly 2 years after its announcement. Even though the game was being made out of a North American company, Nintendo's Miyamoto oversaw the project. He took a very hands-off approach during development and only made executive decisions when he felt the team was straying too far from the original vision. Even though Miyamoto would only visit the office in Vancouver 2 times, he had more influence on the game than what you might think. The game's structure was inspired by TV shows that he was watching at the time. He said that the game could have mini bite-sized stories with self-contained narratives that would come full circle in the end. The structure of the game has been a big talking point for people who don't like it, but we'll discuss this more in a bit. Development officially began in 2009, 2 years before the 3DS would go on to hit store shelves. Apparently, one of the biggest hurdles the team had was figuring out the technology within the new console. Compared to the original DS, the new console would feature significantly more RAM and a much better CPU. Despite these challenges, this is easily one of the best looking 3DS games, and it's safe to say, they knocked it out of the park visually. Dark Moon is a divisive game. In 2001, when the original released on the GameCube, many Nintendo fans weren't happy that they were getting a weird Mario spin-off instead of a new mainline platformer. It took a few years, but Luigi's Mansion gained a cult following and slowly became a fan favorite. For a long time, people thought the series was dead. It had been 12 years between titles, so when Dark Moon finally released, the hype was high. It didn't take long for people to notice that the game was pretty different from the original, and because of this, discourse about the game started and continues to this very day. I happen to like Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon quite a bit, but I understand why it might not be everybody's cup of tea. Let's dive a little deeper into the game and find out what makes it so divisive. Luigi's Mansion 2 starts with an opening scene that shows us the Dark Moon hanging over Evershade Valley. This is the main setting for the game, where 5 separate mansions wait to be explored. They aren't all mansions, but we'll talk about each location as we get to them throughout the game. We soon see Professor Egad working with some friendly ghosts, that is until King Boo shows up and destroys the Dark Moon, shattering it into pieces that are thrown all throughout the valley. Apparently, it's the Dark Moon that's keeping these ghosts friendly. With it now in pieces, they start to act mischievous and destroy Egad's lab. We then cut to the outside of Luigi's house. The scene looks really nice, and it always reminds me of Halloween in the late 90s or early 2000s. I don't know if kids today still get to experience Halloween the way I did, but I really hope they do. Either way, Luigi is seen inside resting up in his recliner when suddenly the TV erupts with the professor frantically pleading for Luigi's help. Luigi is apprehensive given everything he went through the first time around, but with little choice, he gets sucked through the TV, and before we know it, we're face to face with Egad in the bunker. Luckily, the professor has already found the first fragment of the moon, which clears up some of the fog in the valley. I think the best part about the opening is that Luigi clearly does not want to hunt down these fragments and is visibly scared about the whole thing. Without playing the first game, you understand that this has happened before, and Luigi knows that the journey ahead won't be easy. The first location that was revealed after the fog cleared is the Gloomy Manor. The professor gives us a DS, or dual screen as it's referred to in this game. This is a callback to the original, where your map was on a device called the Game Boy Horror. The dual screen can be used for your map and your quest objectives, but also has a video calling feature. This is a big complaint for many people. It's not so bad after a while, but in the early levels, Egad calls you constantly. It does get slightly annoying, but not enough to hamper my opinion of the game. Eventually, we're finally sent in to retrieve the Poltergust 5000 from the garage in the manor. I'd like to mention that this game has 2 versions, the original 3DS version and the HD Switch port. I'll be honest, the Switch port is far better with its updated visuals and dual-stick controls, but unless I'm specifically talking about a remake, I like to make my videos based on how the game was at release. So that's why we're sticking with the 3DS version. Even though the Switch port is better, you might be surprised with how well the original holds up, and we'll see that more as we get further into the game. Anyway, now that we finally get to explore, you'll see how good the visuals look. For a 3DS game, the models and lighting are shockingly good. The game controls buttery smooth and the atmosphere is top notch. Shortly after walking up the path, we find that the main entrance is locked. Looking through the garage window, we see two greenies playing with the car and then scamper off. Once we're done looking through the window, we see a mouse holding a key, so we chase it down and grab it. We then get access to the garage and we equip ourselves with the Poltergust 5000. Egad tells us to practice with it by clearing debris from the room. Eventually, we manage to find two keys and can enter the guard hall, where we see two greenies tossing an item back and forth before vanishing through the wall. This hallway was seen many times in promotional videos for the game, and I always liked how the knights would swing their swords at you as you try to get from one side to the other. Once we're in the foyer, we can retrieve the item that the ghosts were playing with. It turns out it's the strobe bulb. This allows us to shoot bursts of light out of the flashlight, and we can now stun ghosts and unlock panel doors. The coat room is where we encounter our first ghost. The main idea is to stun the ghost with your flash and start sucking them up with the poltergust. They always try to escape, so you want to move the control stick the opposite way from the direction they're trying to flee. This has always felt satisfying to me, but I know of people breaking the circle pad off their 3DS because of this game. I've never had this happen to me, thankfully, but eventually the battles get intense, so I could see it happening. Anyway, we clear out the rest of the ghosts in the foyer and the professor calls us back to the bunker. The end screen of each level shows the time it took to clear the level, how many ghosts you captured, health lost, and the treasure you collected. The treasure you collect is actually valuable in this game as you can spend it to get upgrades for your equipment, which is really cool. This is the point where many longtime fans of the first game started to realize things were a bit different. In the original, there was only one mansion for you to explore, and it kinda worked similar to a Zelda dungeon. You'd get access to a few rooms and find keys over time that unlocked more and more of the mansion. In Luigi's Mansion 2, you play through these bite-sized levels before being warped back to the bunker to a level select screen. This was the structure inspired by a TV show that we talked about earlier. While I understand the backlash this decision caused, I think it makes sense given the portability of the 3DS. At the same time, in later levels of each location, you can fully explore the mansion, so I don't think it would have hurt the game to have the locations work like smaller versions of the original mansion. Either way, it comes down to preference, and I like both, so this doesn't hurt my opinion of the game at all. On the level select screen, it tells us that the paranormal readings are the strongest in the northern rooms of the Gloomy Manor. Once we get to the foyer, we see a new type of ghost called Slammers. We won't be fighting them right away, but they're a little tougher with more HP and more damage output. We see them ripping the gears off of a mechanism that we need to progress, and they scatter across the manor. Now our objective has been updated to find these missing gears so we can move on. The first room we search is the lab. This is the same room Egad was working in with the friendly ghost before the Dark Moon was destroyed. I love that each room has its own identity. I can't recall a single time I've entered a room in Dark Moon and was bored or underwhelmed. Even the more basic areas like the common hall have charm and personality. I'll probably mention it a lot, but my favorite holiday is Halloween, and this is the perfect game to play to get you into the spirit of the season. Anyway, to get to the next room, we have to sneak through a crack in the wall called the Secret Pocket. I love how run down and decrepit it looks. We find a key at the end of the hall and can peer through a crack to spy on the ghosts in the next room over. These are yet another new type of ghost called hiders, and they can be pretty tricky. They like to hide in furniture, so you often have to hunt them down in a room, and then you have a very small window to stun them before they hide again. They're a little tricky at first, but aren't so bad once you get the hang of it. Since we can't access the room they're currently in, we have to head upstairs to find another way in. The master hall has cobwebs that are so thick it's impossible to move forward. So we duck into the upstairs bedroom and have a look around. The game is filled with little puzzles that progress you through the levels. They're never difficult enough to be frustrating, but they add a little bit of a challenge when you're exploring. I described the first game like a Zelda dungeon, and it's really not all that different here. A lot of times you have to find creative ways into rooms or look for hidden keys to let you move forward. It's just a much more condensed version of that concept. In the bedroom, we can't move forward until we find an interactive lever that drops the bed down. Once we sit on it, it flings us into the study, where we find the second gear. Yet again, there's no escaping this room until we find an alternate way out. In this case, we have to find a hidden pressure plate and step on it, which causes the flames to go out in the fireplace. We can then step into it and head down to the studio that way. This is the creative puzzle solving that I like. Not overly brain melting, but it makes you feel clever when you figure things out while playing. Once we're in the studio, we clear out the ghosts we saw earlier and get the third gear. Finally, we can head back upstairs to the parlor where we have to turn the record player on to make the ghosts appear. Once we take them out, we get the 4th gear. We then head back to the mechanism to replace the gears, but find that the slammers had bent them, so we head back to the bunker so the professor can fix them. Once the gears are fixed, we're able to explore the manor more thoroughly. Before heading back, EGAD tells us that a strong paranormal signature has been detected coming from the library, so our goal this time around is to investigate the strange phenomenon. After we lower the fish tank, we gain access to a part of the top level we couldn't get to before. We're able to enter the library and see the piano is playing by itself and a tornado of books is hovering above the center of the room. We can't get down to the main level yet, so we head over to the dining room next door. I've always liked that you can do the party trick where you pull the cloth off the table with the Poltergust 5000. Towards the back of the room, we find a chute that leads us downstairs to the kitchen where we encounter a new type of greenie. It's basically the same as the others, but it's using pots and pans as armor. This is such a charming idea, and I love that they thought of this. You have to wait for them to attack you before you can stun them, but other than that, they're pretty much the same. The kitchen leads directly to the bottom floor of the library, and I've always liked this room. I love the whole vibe of the place. Something about the cozy fireplace and the wooden floorboards makes you want to just hang out here for a minute or two. Unfortunately, we don't get that opportunity because the game's first mini-boss resides here. We end up having to fight 3 ghosts called poltergeists. We haven't encountered these yet, and they can be kinda tricky because they'll throw objects at you while they're being captured and have the highest health pool we've seen up to this point. I like this fight quite a bit, but they end up being somewhat common enemies later in the game, which lessens the coolness of this fight slightly. After we beat them, the professor wants us to get the dark light device which he left in the lab. When we try to enter the room, the doorway disappears right before our eyes. In order to get back into the lab, we have to go upstairs and take a secret fireplace down. Sure enough, we find the dark light device here, but we have to fight a new type of greenie yet again. This time they wear sunglasses, so they're immune to your flash until you pull their shades off with the poltergust. The dark light device is entirely new to the series, and I like it quite a bit. It adds a lot to puzzle solving as you get further into the game. Basically, you can scan areas where it looks like something should be there and reveals a hidden item. In order to fully reveal it, you have to collect spirit orbs, but once you do, the object shows up. For example, we use it to make the door reappear so we can exit the lab. The professor wants us to find the ghost responsible for causing the disappearances. To do this, we use the dark light to reveal a new door that we couldn't see before and use it to go outside to the patio. I don't have a lot to say about this area, but I like the way it looks. This level feels a lot closer to the original game. We have access to most of the mansion and have to explore it to try to find the ghost. It's a very creative level too. You have to solve puzzles somewhat differently than what you've been used to up to this point. Anyway, we finally find the culprit in the dining room, and it's a classic Mario Boo who's been releasing the spirit orbs. It's nice to see a Boo finally. I don't personally share this criticism, but a lot of people have said that they don't like the design of the new ghost enemies in this game. I think the criticism is about how their design has become a little more simplified and goofy, but whether you like them or not, I think everybody likes Boo, so it's nice to see him make a return. Once we capture Boo, we head back to the bunker where EGAD sends us back in to clean up spiderwebs across the manor. I kinda like this level and I kinda don't. On one hand, it kinda feels like padding, but on the other, I can't deny how fun it is to explore the entirety of the mansion just hunting down these cobwebs. I like that you can pick up the web balls and light them on fire while hordes of spiders are getting burnt. This is also how you clear the thicker webs that the vacuum can't. We can finally clear the wall of webs in the master hall and reveal an attic stairway that leads to the rafters. This room is really cool. I like how worn down it looks, plus it's above the library which you can see below. This is the last place we had to go to clear the web, so now that that's done, there's only one thing left to do. The professor tells us that he's found the source of the spider infestation in the manor, and you guessed it, it's in the cellar. What you're about to see is one of my favorite levels in Luigi's Mansion 2. We finally gain access to the elevator and take it down to the cellar, where we find a very angry giant spider. First of all, I absolutely love the way this room looks, and the boss fight is really cool. It perfectly blends puzzle solving and action, which for a lot of games can be tricky to pull off. The first time you play this fight, you kinda have to think about how to get the fire to the spider, and each time you do, it's a little different. The web clearing level before this sets you up pretty good to do this though, so it's not too tough to figure out. After the spider takes a hit, it spits up a ghost called a possessor with unlimited health. Each time you capture it, a layer of its ghostly skin is peeled down. Once you've done this 3 times, it's finally captured and we get the first of 5 Dark Moon fragments. I really like this boss fight a lot, and it was at this point when I played the game originally that made me realize I was really gonna like this game. There are higher highs coming up and even some low points too, but we'll get to those later. Before we head to the next location, I want to finalize my thoughts on the Gloomy Manor. I love that this location is just a standard creepy haunted house. This might be a long shot, but if anyone played I Spy Spooky Mansion as a kid on the computer, then you might be getting a similar vibe here. Each mansion in this game has its own themes and identities, but I like that this is just a classical haunted house. The visuals and puzzle solving were perfect for starting the game. It showed off how good the atmosphere can be, and it made you think a little bit too. As much as I like the Gloomy Manor, I like the next place even more. The Haunted Towers might be my favorite location in the game, but it's hard to say because depending on the mood I'm in, that opinion changes. I've always liked nature and foresty areas in video games, so naturally I would gravitate towards liking this place. The professor tells us that the Haunted Towers is powered by a giant water generator, but it isn't working, so he sends us in to see if we can fix it. The opening scene sets the stage perfectly. 2 haunted towers with a giant tree in between while the moon softly lights up the place. I'm gonna try not to mention how I love this place visually every 30 seconds, but just know that I do. Once we get to the hydro generator, it actually seems to be in working condition. However, it turns out it's clogged somewhere, so we need to climb to the top of the tower to fix it. One thing I love about this location is that it isn't just 2 separate towers. Instead, they're interconnected by a bridge. For this level, we can't just climb up the tower we're in just yet, so we need to go to the other one to investigate. The other tower has a hidden door we have to discover, which leads to the greenhouse. Again, this is now the second location we've been in, and each room still feels like it has personality. As I said earlier, I love stuff like this in video games, so it was cool to see in Luigi's Mansion. Pretty soon we make it up to the plant nursery, where 2 giant Venus flytraps attack us every time we try to pass. I love the look of these enemies, and I wish there were more plant-like enemies here, but this is pretty much it. Anyway, we have to suck up this spiky plant and shoot it into their mouths to kill them, and once we do, we gain access to a chest with a key inside. We then cross the sky bridge that connects the 2 towers, and I love this so much. It reminds me of a treehouse or something. As we cross the bridge, a horde of crows try to swoop down and attack us, but we make it to the other side without much trouble. In the laboratories, we defeat a few ghosts, and then we discover a plant that basically acts like balloons. If we use the poltergust on them, we can either inflate or deflate them. This is a really cool gameplay mechanic that basically lets Luigi fly around the level and do some platforming. We use it to go up to the lounge, which leads us outside to the water supply area. Once we get to the roof, we have to fill up a bucket with goo and set it on a pressure plate so we can fix the blockage in the pipes. Once we do, we see that the water generator is working again as it should, but just before we head back to the bunker, a giant yellow ghost called a gobber shoots out of the pipe, showing that this was in fact what had caused the clog. These ghosts aren't difficult to fight, but they have a ton of health and like to throw sludge at you while you're trying to capture them. All in all, this was a fantastic first level for the Haunted Towers, and it shows off a lot of reasons why I liked the place early on. Next, we're told to head to the Hollow Tree and try to gain entry. As we cross the bridge to the gate, a bunch of hiders come out and steal a bunch of the mechanism parts that we need, just like what happened with the gears in the first mansion. Throughout this level, we get to explore a few new areas, like the garden, which I like the look of, especially the background with all the dead, twisted trees. The gardener's lab is also really cool. I like that it's a secret underground lab where someone was experimenting on plants or something. If we activate the water in the botany lab, a giant stalk will grow from a test tube which leads us upstairs to the seedling laboratory. I always thought this was a cool idea. Dark Moon isn't afraid to lean into its themes, that's for sure. Finally, we get to the conservatory, which was where the last hider was, and we get the final piece for the gate. With all the pinwheel veins in hand, we can fix the gate and enter the Hollow Tree. This place looks really cool and it reminds me of the Great Deku Tree from Ocarina of Time. Anytime I get to explore the inside of a tree in a video game, I'm happy. This room is really unique as we haven't seen something like this in the game yet. The stairs are tricky as you try to climb up them. Sometimes you can walk on them normally, but other times they act as a treadmill or collapse entirely, normally resulting in a fight with a ghost. Once we get to the top, we clear the webs blocking our way forward, but before we enter the passage, a monster-faced wooden door slams shut in our face. So we have to go back down to the bottom and try to find a key. This time we have to search for it in the crypt. To get to the crypt, we travel through a tree root and find a secret passage that leads to the old graveyard. Inside, we find EGAT has a Toad assistant who became trapped in a painting. This level has now evolved to escort Toad back to the bunker. These levels pop up every mansion moving forward, and I like them for the most part. Yes, it feels like padding slightly, but these levels for the missions are normally pretty creative, so I don't mind them. Plus, it's funny seeing how scared Toad gets of everything, and sometimes you have to use the poltergust to pick Toad up by his head, which is just hilarious. Back in the old graveyard, we encounter the mini-boss for the Haunted Towers. Unlike last time, these 3 ghosts are unique and can't be encountered elsewhere. The 3 sister ghosts are actually somewhat difficult to beat. The first time I played this game, I lost this fight. They all have mirrors and spin around you in a circle, so you have to wait for one of them to drop their mirror to stun them. The hard part is when you start to capture one of the sisters, the other 2 will attack you and they deal a decent chunk of damage. Naturally, as the fight goes on, it gets a little easier with the less sisters you have to deal with. With that out of the way, we need to escort Toad down to the gardener's lab to get him out of here. With Toad safely in the bunker, we find out that the key we're looking for is in the rooftop pool. This is on top of the other tower. This time around, we can water a sprout in the plant nursery and it makes a giant staircase for us to climb up to the new rooms in the tower. This leads us to the Rumpus Room. I really like this room. We have to peer into a dollhouse mansion and see ourselves, which is not only creepy, but really cool. It shows us which Jack-in-the-Box is hiding all the ghosts in the room, which we promptly defeat. The room feels very reminiscent to the original game, which is always a good thing. We then pass through the family room and into the solarium, which looks really nice. This area leads into the west bedroom. After solving a quick puzzle, we're able to access the crow's nest. This is the second bridge that connects the 2 towers, but this one is much higher up and looks a lot more rickety. This leads back to the conservatory, where we can use balloons to get to the secret balcony that contains a key we need to reach the rooftop pool on the other side. This leads us to the west bathroom, where we discover a new type of ghost called a creeper. They'll pick you up and hold you inside of them, which slowly deals damage over time. After taking down the creeper, we sit in the lawn chair, which finally elevates us to the rooftop pool. This room introduces us to another new ghost type called sneakers. They aren't hard to beat, but they work in teams where it makes it hard to capture them in one go. After we take them out, we get the big key back, and right as we're about to celebrate, a ghost dog comes in and takes the key and throws it out the window. Listen, I love Polterpup. He's so cute, and who doesn't love dogs? I love his design and the concept that even after a dog passes, they can still be playful little ghosts. However, these levels are absolutely my least favorite part of the game. Just like the escort mission with Toad, from here on out, each mansion will get one of these Polterpup levels, and not only does it feel like padding, but most of the time the levels themselves are kind of annoying. It requires you to use the Darklight device to find the dog's tracks and hunt him down throughout the level. I would have happily taken less content over having to play these levels every time. I dislike these levels, but I don't downright hate them, so even though it sours the game for me a little, it doesn't make me hate the game or anything. Since these levels are so monotonous, I'll probably mention them briefly unless something interesting happens in them. It's such a shame because the Polterpup is adorable, but oh well. Now that we finally have the key, it's time to challenge the final boss of the Haunted Towers. We use the key to open the door to the eerie staircase. This place looks insanely cool. I love that it looks like an infinite staircase from the screen of the 3DS. The idea here is that for each level, you have 3 stairways to choose from, with only one actually letting you up. The other 2 are traps which require you to fight off ghosts. Each time this happens, you can see the correct path on the way back up for a brief moment, as the right stairs won't be lit up with blue torches. After a few minutes of trial and error, we reach the top and break the wall open. This leads us to the treehouse, where the final boss awaits. As we climb up the stairs, they spring to life and become a vicious monster with blue flames that look like spikes on its back. I gotta say, I love this boss fight, but it's nowhere near as cool as the first one. It's actually way easier, but I don't mind because it's so cool. I have a feeling that some people might think this boss is lame because, I mean, you are fighting stairs after all. But to me, I think it's awesome how creative this is. It reminds me of something from Monster House, which was always on repeat at my house growing up. Anyway, just like last time, we beat the Possessor and get yet another Dark Moon piece. To finalize my thoughts on the Haunted Towers, I love the location. Sometimes it's my favorite in the game, but there is another runner-up later. The puzzle solving was a lot more clever this time around and required a little bit more thinking, but still not bad enough to be frustrating. This place is the gold standard of what a well-designed location feels like in a playthrough. The only blemish I could give it is the Polterpup level, but that's not really fair to the location itself, and the boss fight being less grandiose and easier, but I love the fight anyway, so I really don't have any negatives here. The next location we'll be heading to is the old Clockworks. I'll say it right now, this is my least favorite area in Dark Moon. I don't dislike it, but it's definitely at the bottom of the list for me. To start, it's got this desolate desert vibe to it, which I know some people love, but for me it automatically snaps me out of that Halloween spirit the game puts me in. Instead, I feel like I'm just kind of in a random area now with no rhyme or reason as to why this place even exists. I think I might be a little too hard on this place just based on theming alone, but my videos aren't really meant to be objective think pieces. Instead, I write these videos to showcase the things I love in video games and the things I don't based on my personal feelings, and unfortunately, that's just kind of the way I feel about this place. That being said, there's actually a lot of good this place has to offer. Our objective is simple. We need to get to the top of the clock tower and find the next Dark Moon piece. Upon our arrival, the place looks to be an abandoned factory, with old clocks scattered around in the sand. We reach the clock tower gate, which we can't interact with yet because the clock hands are missing. The professor tells us we need to look for a compass which will let us access the underground areas here. We find the compass in the drafting office and head back to the bunker to figure out what to do next. I didn't really mention any of the rooms here, and that's because even though they're not bad, they just seem kind of uninteresting to talk about. Again, I don't hate this place, but I don't want to fake enthusiasm. Anyway, the compass grants us access to a secret passage that leads underground, which leads us to the Canyon Narrows. I like this room a lot. It looks cool and I like using the poltergeist as a zip line over the canyon. The underground area of the old Clockworks is a little more interesting than the surface. It's an ancient archaeological site where puzzles like raising the sand in the quarry are very fitting. Once we reach the tomb, we encounter a new type of greenie, which take after classic mummies. You have to stun them with the flash and make them fall down to suck up all the bandages, revealing just a standard greenie underneath. I like these enemies a lot, but when there's a bunch of them at once, they can be kinda tricky to fight. Before the fight with the mummies, we saw a poltergeist take the clock hands and zoom off with them. Back at the bunker, Egad tells us that he's tracked down where the poltergeist is and claims that it is ancient. In this level, we need to go to the other side of the roundhouse. We end up getting to the transportation hall, which is one of my favorite parts of this location. The hallway acts as a giant treadmill which runs faster than you can walk, so you have to duck into side rooms to get to the end of them to progress. Each side room has its own puzzle that you have to solve to get to the other side, so yeah, I thought this section was pretty neat. At the end of the hall, we find a key that we need to make it to the roundhouse. It's here that we face the mini-boss of the area. It's a poltergeist like in Gloomy Manor, but this time it's more powerful and the fight is pretty cool. It spins up dust devils which throw bombs at you that you have to avoid. When you finally try to capture it, a few sneakers pop up and make it harder to get them in one go. This is a good challenge, but I think the three sisters are a little harder. Once we defeat it, we get the clock hands back and head back to the bunker. It turns out we still need the hour hand. The next mission is another polterpup level, so I'm not going to go over it, but we got the hour hand that we need and now we're just missing one more piece, which is the rotor. To get the rotor, we need help from another toad friend, but in order to get him, we need to find a key in the crank room. This room is a highlight for the old Clockworks as it's very uniquely designed and fun to navigate. With the key in hand, we find the toad assistant and he helps us way down an elevator that lets us progress to the storage room and we find the rotor. With the rotor in hand, we finally have all the pieces we need to activate the clock tower gate and face the final boss of the old Clockworks. Once we set the gate to 730, we enter a room called the Movements and it's a pretty cool way into the boss arena. The platform slowly rises as you avoid bats and spiders. Soon we get to a doorway which leads us to the belfry. I gotta say, this is easily the weakest boss fight in the game. Firstly, the battle arena is kinda cool because you get a unique camera angle throughout most of the fight which takes place on a giant clock where you have to avoid the hour hands as you capture ghosts. But that's the issue. The boss fight is just a big gauntlet fight. Just wave after wave of enemies and then sometimes the possessor pops out giving you a chance to whittle it down. My big problem with this fight is the fact that it comes after two really cool and creative fights and then they just kinda slap this together. All in all, I would say this has always been disappointing to me. Like, we fought literal stairs before this. It could have been cool to fight a giant grandfather clock or something. I've already shared my criticisms and overall thoughts about this place at the beginning, so no need to retread old ground. With another Dark Moon piece, we can head to another one of my favorite places in this game, the Secret Mine. This location opens with a shot panning around the outside. You see a snowy cabin, and I absolutely love the vibe. The thought of a haunted cabin on a snowy mountain in the middle of a forest is not only creepy, but weirdly relaxing to me. I've mentioned this in other videos, but I hated snowy levels in video games when I was a kid. But nowadays, I really like them most of the time, and this is no exception. We start out at the Chalet Approach, which is a snowy path that leads up to the cabin. If you haven't been impressed by the visuals up to this point, then surely this place will change your mind. I'm seriously impressed with how good this game can look, and it's partly why I chose to play the 3DS version. Obviously, the Switch port looks fantastic, but I wanted to show everyone how well the original held up visually. Anyway, this level is another Toad rescue mission. The first room in the cabin is the chalet. I've mentioned how much I love the idea of a snowy mansion, but just look at this place. The polar bear rug, the cozy fireplace, the antler display. I would seriously live here. After passing through the smokehouse, we reach Ice Lake, which has an immaculate vibe. You can even see King Boo in the background as he flies towards the full moon. Inside the fishing hut, we find the Toad assistant, who once again was sealed in a painting. Once we free the Toad, he starts to jump excitedly, which breaks the ice, and we plunge down to a deep, icy cavern. Which is why the place is called the Secret Mine, as most of what we can explore are these icy caverns that used to be a mine. After exploring a few rooms of the cavern, we make it to the airway, which has an elevator we need to reach to successfully rescue Toad. Once we fix the rope bridge, we reach the elevator, which comes up underneath the polar bear rug. I'll admit, as much as I love this place, it is a bit weird starting things off with a Toad rescue mission, but it wasn't a bad level or anything, I just think it was an odd choice. Anyway, the professor shows us an image of some boos locking up regular ghosts in the red crystals and wants us to investigate what's going on. The objective for this level is simple. We need to reach the bottom of the mine. Soon after we enter the caverns, we reach a room called the Crossroads, which introduces the player to portals. I love portals in Dark Moon, as it opens up so many possibilities for creative puzzles. The next room is the Skip Slope. There's not much to say about it, but anytime you get to slide down a hill in a video game, it's always a good time. We soon reach a lift that takes us to the bottom floor of the mines and enter the Coward's Chasm, which has a really cool visual puzzle. It's designed to stump you, but if you look closely, you can walk right behind the wall of ice. I know it's not mind-blowing, but this always stuck with me, so I thought it was worth a mention. After a few puzzles, we managed to find the Crystal Quarry. It turns out that the boos were using the crystals to power up regular ghosts, the basic enemies, into quite the challenge. Next, Egad tells us that he finally pinged the location of the Dark Moon piece, so he sends us in to try to find it. In the terminal, we're able to use the explosive robots to destroy the ice wall, which reveals a room we couldn't enter before. Before we go inside, 3 powered-up ghosts put chains on the door, and we need to explore the secret mines to capture all 3 of them to be able to enter the room. Upon clearing the chains, we enter a room called the High Wires. It's pretty neat because we can use a cannon-like device to shoot fireballs at the zip lines to melt the ice off them so we can cross the chasm. This leads us to the workshop landing, where we activate the power. Believe it or not, this was the last level before the final boss. For some reason, this is the only location in the game that only has 3 levels, but I think it kind of plays into why I like this place so much. Besides the amazing theme, it has no filler and is paced perfectly. I honestly kind of wish the rest of the mansions were like this. Not that I don't like them, but it felt so satisfying not having to hit a roadblock that felt forced into the game. The boss fight for the secret mine is awesome. It's not really difficult, but it's creative and unique, which was nice considering the last boss fight wasn't very good. The Possessor takes control of a giant monster face made of ice, and Luigi has to ride a sled capable of shooting bombs at it. The idea is that you shoot away the chunks of ice until its full face is exposed, and then shoot a bomb into its mouth to trigger a fight with the Possessor. Again, this isn't difficult, but the visual design and creativity really bumps us up a notch in my book. After beating the boss, we get another Dark Moon piece and, like usual, head to the bunker. It's no secret that I love the secret mines, and I've praised the area enough, and I've mentioned why I've liked it so much. Sometimes this area is my favorite, even over the haunted towers. But there is another runner-up for my top spot, which is our next location. The Treacherous Mansion is huge. Funny enough, it's the only location in the game with mansion in its title. The location is almost as big as the mansion from the original game, which is pretty impressive. The opening scene shows us a giant house on a cliff in the middle of a huge circle of waterfalls. This place looks amazing from the outside. The intensity is already high as we start out at the veranda, where we immediately have to cross over narrow cliffs without plunging to our death in the chasm below. The front entrance is lined with those classic creepy-looking gargoyles, which I really like. Upon using the key to open the front door, the polterpup pops out of nowhere and takes the key. I wouldn't normally talk about this level, but since we haven't explored the location yet, I'm gonna make an exception. We make our way to the bottom of the well, which leads us to the guard tunnel. I like the Treacherous Mansion because it has a medieval castle vibe to it, especially in the lower portions of the mansion. Once we get to the ceremonial chamber, we even have to fight greenies who have taken possession of armored knights, which is really cool. I hate to say it again, but the visuals here blow me away. Just look at the lighting as we explore the area. Anyway, we're still following the Polterpup, which leads us down even further into the haunted catacombs. This is kind of like the Lost Woods in Ocarina of Time. If you go down the wrong path, you end up where you started, but it's not too bad because with the Darklight device, you just have to follow the paw prints. Eventually, we find the dungeon cells, which again, looks really nice, and after solving a pretty clever puzzle, we capture the Polterpup and get the key back. My main issue with the Polterpup levels, besides the padding, is that they almost always retread old ground, whereas this level didn't feel too bad considering we got to explore all new areas while looking for him, so I actually didn't mind this level. Since the professor doesn't know where the final Dark Moon piece is, we're sent in to look for his toad assistant who might know where it's at. Inside the mansion, we start at the front entrance, which has 6 portals in it. This room acts as the main hub of the mansion, and the whole location gets easier to navigate once the portals are unlocked. The Dark Age exhibit looks really cool with the swords and shields that line the walls. It's here that we activate the first portal. The Ice Age exhibit has another portal to activate, and it's also where we find one of the toad assistants that we need to help. That's right, in this level there are actually 2 toads that we need to rescue, with the other being in the jungle exhibit on the other side of the mansion. The puzzle solving in this level is excellent. Not only does this mansion blend all the mechanics and themes from other locations in the game, but the portals make you have to think outside the box. In order to save the toad from the ice exhibit, we have to take a piece of wood from the jungle exhibit, light it on fire in the ancient exhibit, and melt the ice finely to free the toad from the painting. This is easily one of the best levels in Dark Moon. It goes to show how having creative freedom when designing a game can really pay off in the end. To save the other toad, we just need to grab a bucket from the Dark Age exhibit so we can water the plant in the jungle exhibit. This allows us to shoot a sprout at the giant Venus flytrap. I mean, I don't know what else I can say, this level is just extremely good. To transport them back to the bunker, we need to reach the inner courtyard, which is another fantastic looking area. In order to get to the second level, we have to shoot both toads into the cages held by the gargoyle statue. Once we do this, a giant spiral staircase is revealed, letting us walk up to the balconies. This area gets more interesting in later levels as you have to solve certain puzzles by rotating the staircase, which allows access to different parts of the second story. This was by far the best toad rescue level. The others can't even compare to this. In the next mission, we have to find the train exhibit on the second floor. Firstly, we enter the nautical exhibit, which I love by the way. Anything to do with ships or pirates will always pique my interest. It's here that we activate another portal before heading to the west side of the mansion. This is where we discover the space exhibit, which is not only a great room, but upon looking into the telescope, we see a strong poltergeist, and before we know it, we're warped onto the planet where a mini-boss fight takes place. The fight can be tough. You have to avoid shooting stars while trying to chip away at its 200 points of health, but once we beat him, we get the book we need to enter the train room. Before we go, we can activate the portal in this room as a shortcut back to the other side. Once we get to the train exhibit, we clear out a few ghosts and take a look at the binoculars that are facing the model train set. We see a bunch of boos gathered around a painting of Mario, where he's trapped. The professor brings us back to the bunker with a new idea. He wants us to shrink down so that we can fit into the model and take things head on. This is legitimately a boss fight, but it won't be the last. I love the way that we shrink down to the size of the model train, but this boss fight is kind of annoying. We have to fight a giant boo, and when the time is right, try to sling him towards the front of the train, which breaks him apart into smaller boos. Then we have to sling them into the train cars. The fight itself isn't that hard, but it feels like the precise aiming is the real fight here. Normally, this game's controls are buttery smooth, but it kinda exemplifies that it's not always like that. Maybe it's a skill issue, but I remember having a hard time here on the switchboard as well. Once we round up all the boos, we find out that this was an ambush to try to take us out, but we got out of the trap. The professor tells us we need to investigate the terrace as he's picking up strong paranormal readings there. On the terrace, we see King Boo open up a portal, releasing a wave of ghosts upon the mansion. Egad tells us that if we don't capture all the ghosts in a timely manner, the whole dimension could collapse. This level is another combat gauntlet essentially, and you're up against the clock while doing it. This might be the hardest level of the game. I don't hate it because we're getting near the end of the game and I understand that they wanted to make an intense level, but this mansion had a lot of great puzzle solving opportunities, so to end it all by doing a combat focused level was a little disappointing. Once we deal with all the ghosts in the mansion, we head back to the terrace and face hordes of ghosts. This is one of the most intense parts of the game, and it's why I'm not surprised that some people have broken off the circle pad of the 3DS. My hands seriously hurt because of this level, but we were able to capture all the ghosts before time ran out. The last thing we have to do in the Treacherous Mansion is defeat the final boss and get the last Dark Moon piece. This fight is extremely cool. I like the arena, and the fight itself is one of the best we've had since the first mansion. You have to wait for the knights to attack you and get stuck in the rug, so you pull it out under their feet to reveal the possessor. If this is all it was, I would say this was an okay fight, but on the last stage, a hulking knight shows up. You can't even see anything other than its legs, it's so big. You have to line up each foot on the rug and pull the rugs out in quick succession to finally bring the knight down. This fight is one of my favorites in the series, and it still holds up today in my opinion. The Treacherous Mansion is the highlight of the game, I think. As much as I love all the locations except the old Clockworks, this takes everything good about each location and combines it all with the Dark Age theme. I'm really happy with the way this place turned out. The locations were all so cool and interesting that I actually wish there were a few more levels here. With the last Dark Moon piece in hand, we only have one more thing to do. It's time to face King Boo once and for all. King Boo is the master of illusions, and his boss fight reflects this well. Between captures, he'll send you into a dimension of random hallways where you have to avoid obstacles. While I think this boss fight is fitting and fun for King Boo, it felt like it wasn't as grandiose as it could have been. While I don't love this boss fight, I like it enough and I think it's a decent ending to Dark Moon. When we capture King Boo, we get the last piece of the Dark Moon and save Mario. A cutscene shows the professor letting out all the friendly ghosts that we've captured throughout the adventure, and Evershade Valley returns to normal. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon is a game that not everyone loves, and that's okay. It separated itself from the original in ways that would naturally cause division in the fanbase. But over the years, I've heard so many people say how terrible of a game this is, and I can't sit here and pretend that this is true. I understand not liking the game, but it's by no means bad. It may be different, but a lot of what makes this game unique are its strongest moments. We get to experience many different themes and styles while the puzzle solving evolves with each location, culminating in a mansion with everything combined. I don't mind the level structure as it was released on a portable console, which made sense. I hope that if you made it this far in the video and haven't tried Dark Moon, I've maybe convinced you to give it a shot. You can get the 3DS version dirt cheap nowadays, and the Switch version is readily available, and I highly recommend either. Surely Next Level Games is cooking up something for a hypothetical Luigi's Mansion 4. Whether you love or hate Dark Moon, I know we all want the series to succeed, so here's hoping that the future looks bright for Luigi's Mansion. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.